Obviously, 2020 was one hell of a year, and one that we don't want it to repeat. But interestingly, we are now into the new year. We're into 2021. And the question for us is, are we just going to roll over from 2020, or are we going to use this as an opportunity to hit reset? But the question for us is, how do we hit reset? And what are some of the things we should think about as we move into a new year, and that we look to really kickstart success? So today, I'm going to really show some simple tools and techniques. This session will be recorded, and then it'll be available on my website together with all the tools and templates and a copy of this pack for you to use or to share with your team, or to share with anyone you think's appropriate. So welcome. There will be a little bit of interaction. I'll ask you to enter a few things into the chat, and also do a little poll in a minute just to make it as interactive as possible. So what are we going to do today? We're going to look at three different things. We're going to look at, firstly, review. How do we really, as I say, not just roll over from 2020 into 2021, but really review what happened? What does it mean for us as a society? What does it mean for you as leaders? What does it mean for our teams and for our businesses? In a succinct fashion, but we really want to be able to take some things forward, but not necessarily take others. And what are they, and how do we make that decision? And that really bit of a review, a bit of an understanding where we are, helps us then to think about how do we hit the reset button, and what do we need to hit the reset button? Not everything, but there are some things, given what we've learned and what we've seen and the opportunities that have arisen, that enable us to say, what do we want to take into 2020 strategy and beyond? What do we want to look at in terms of our business model, both for small, medium, and large organisations? And once we've decided that, made those sorts of decisions, then what do we need to regrow? Now, many businesses, from a top line or revenue or profit perspective, grew quite fine in 2020. In fact, some I know of actually did better than ever. Were able to take advantage of the market conditions and what they offered in a way that matched the needs. So that's not what they need to regrow. But I think we all need to think about what's the right capabilities that we need to grow, either based on what we've learned in 2020 about our people, our leadership, and our organisation, but also what our strategy is, what we need to reset going forward. And we can't, of course, forget that the fact is that people have been through in Australia, and even worse for people like Jared in Dublin, a continued degree of uncertainty. And that has been a stressful experience for many. And as we know, mental health presentations have increased. So what do we need to do, for instance, around resilience? So today, 3 areas: review, reset, and regrow. And in each of those, I'll share some things that I've been thinking about, things that I've worked with clients and with some of the boards I sit on, and also share those tools with you so that you can work it through yourself. But it has been a tumultuous 2020. But really, we've had degrees of uncertainty and volatility, complexity and ambiguity for a long time. Nothing's new in that sense. The volatility, uncertain volatility of fast, unpredictable changes. And we've seen that even more so on steroids, so to speak, in 2020. That's leading to further uncertainty, and just depending on your country and even your state, issues like state borders continues to deliver for many organisations and people uncertainty about what the way forward is. Now, complexity, clearly it's a very complex health environment. It's going to be a complex vaccine and vaccination environment. How do we actually deal with that? But more broadly, the complexity of the business market that we're in and what we've seen different organisations change. And it's not completely clear, and it's never going to be. So this is really a big issue for us economically, socially, and as leaders. One of the people I quite often look to for some of these issues around the future and around disruption is Peter Hinson from an organisation called NextWorks out of Belgium. And I was lucky enough to be on a course that he ran a couple of years ago in London. And Peter has written a number of books, and I suggest it's always worth listening to some of his podcasts. But he wrote a book back in 2015, 5 years ago, and it came out 6 years, called The Network Always Wins. And it's all around surviving in the age of uncertainty, and very much from a digital and an innovation perspective. And Peter is someone that consults to Google and a whole lot of startups, and has a large practice in China as well. But his question then, as it was last year, was how do we respond to this uncertainty? How do we respond to this VUCA world? And back in 2015, when he wrote that book, he came up with a very neat vaccine in a very prescient fashion, which he said was the way, in his view, to respond to a VUCA world. And he reprised that late last year, or the middle of last year, when he was talking and thinking about COVID. And vaccine obviously links quite well. Now, this vaccine is 1C short, but it really is about how you deal with uncertainty in a VUCA world, and COVID, of course, which is the epitome of that. And the vaccine was about inoculating operations against this mad VUCA world in which our models have grown increasingly useless as we see new types of competition and new forms. Velocity is obviously about speed and move quickly. And I think one of the things that many organisations were pleased with and were able to prove was we actually were able to move really quickly during COVID. So we showed, for instance, the ability to stand up technology to allow people from home was a great example. But also agility, and one of the most overused words during COVID was pivot. But really, how do you pivot? How do you skate to where the puck's going? One of the really great ways of thinking about agility. How do we actually leverage capability and insight to be able to move your businesses, your leadership, and your model to where the opportunities are? How do we change our production systems? And we saw, for instance, a really simple example was many organisations be able to change their production systems to put out sanitizer and face masks and the like. But that showed it could be done. What we now need is a good degree of creativity. Quite often when organisations are in a downward spiral or a challenge with economic conditions, creativity is one of the first things to go out the door. And we've seen organisations over the years, the Kodaks, the Blackberries, the Nokias, lose creativity and then lose their competitive advantage in their position in the market. Now, I think creativity is even more important in these chaotic times. But we need to realise that creativity is not a solitary activity. It's not sitting there and coming up with zany things or thinking about problem solving in a different way. It's about looking to combine different ideas, different ways of thinking, different ways of problem solving to come up with new and novel solutions, ones that are actually going to be able to enable you to move fast and move in an agile sense. And I think the opportunity to make those combinations is really key, to be able to bring things together in a way that is different so that you are actually able to innovate. And it's not just innovate on your products and services or the markets or geographies or sectors that you service in, but also what is your service model? How do you move to that? Move on your service model. And I'll share some research on McKinsey in a minute that talks about service model innovation, but also your business model. How do you change that? How do you innovate to have very different business models? Now, people point to the FANGs of the world, the Facebooks and Amazons and Alphabets to that, but they have innovated their business models. They have platform models, and that sort of disruption, that way of thinking, is really key as we move forward. And the one that quite often challenges us as we think is network. What networks are we part of? In fact, what ecosystems are we part of? What are the interactions between our customers, our suppliers, our competitors, our platforms, the ways that we go to market? What is that network effect? And you just have to look at some of those FANG ones like Apple. They have a great network, albeit closed model. But more and more businesses, even in manufacturing and in healthcare, are looking at the information they have as the key asset, and how they leverage that information and information that their customers have, or their suppliers have, even their competitors have, to create a different sort of business model, to think about the benefits of actually of a network, being flexible. Healthcare is a great example of this, and I hope that continues in what is a very complex market. And then, of course, experimentation, the ability to try these things quickly, the ability to be able to be really quick and to think really fast in terms of new ideas. So, you know, velocity, agility, creativity, innovation, network, and experimentation. And one of the boards I sit on, Circus Oz, they added another C for them, which was about circus arts. So you can use these types of things in any way that works for you. So I'm going to run a poll at the moment to get you to think about what's the one area you think you need to be able to drive change on, to create that change, to be able to think differently. I'll just get the poll up. So where do you need to drive change in your organisation? Is it velocity? Is it agility? Is it creativity or network or experimentation? So hopefully the polls come up now. If you can just click on the one that you think is the number one for you in your organisation, for you as a leader. Be interesting to see what the different people are thinking about in their organisations. Nearly there, a couple more to go. Fantastic. Okay, I'll end that poll. And what we've got is we've got 4 people around experimentation and innovation. So that's interesting. I think, obviously with innovation and being creative, the ability to actually experiment is pretty key. It's all very well to be creative and innovate, but if you can't put it into practice and can't do small experiments that you can learn fast from it, is key. And a couple then for some of the others. So innovation, experimentation, that's good to hear. So if we think about what we need to do I was talking about 3 areas: review, reset, and regrow. For all of us, it's around reviewing what it is that we need to do with our customers. Which customer segments worked well for us during COVID, which didn't? Which ones look like having the greatest potential for us as we move forward? Is it the same ones that you looked at before and serviced before? I'm a big fan of the Pareto principle, doing a very simple Pareto application, i.e. which 20% of your customers delivers 80% of your value, your business, your revenue, your profit. Whether it's 20, 80 or 37, doesn't really matter. But it's generally a disproportionate amount. So what groups, sectors? Are there new sectors that popped up, or the ones that you think have a real opportunity that you saw because you saw customers in a different light? Then, just as importantly, people. Which people were actually able to stand up and show leadership during the time? And I don't just mean the notional leaders, the formal leaders, but which people within the organisation actually were able to stand up and deliver leadership that was different, leadership that made a difference to your organisation, and which people stayed on the couch. And increasingly, I think as businesses look to move back to having more people in the office, that's a new opportunity to see how do we actually create different types of dynamics for how our people work together. And whilst there is some reticence I'm noticing from some businesses in Melbourne, or people in businesses in Melbourne, we need to help them get back, because being in the office for some time is a great part around collaboration, culture, and particularly for younger people being coached by those with more experience. Then what about our systems and processes? What worked well for us? Which ones stood up? What in terms of our own digital delivery worked really well? How did that actually stand up in the face? And where do we need to actually change our processes to actually be more agile, to be able to move faster? Do we need everyone to be involved with every decision? That's not always the case. What actually processes work better in a slimmed down, quicker world? And then our competitive advantage, our shield. How did that shield hold up? Was our competitive advantage still an advantage and competitive for that nature? Is it sustainable? What parts of our business actually may have shown us in a different way that actually there are things that our customers and our people valued that we maybe didn't show the same sort of focus on before. So that's really around reviewing that and thinking about it. It's also about then standing back from your own business and thinking about what's happened more broadly in the world and how does that apply to your marketplace, to your sector, to your operation. And I wrote a paper after one of my leader forums where we explored this very issue, and I saw that there were 6 shifts occurring, which I think in reviewing them over the last few weeks, I think are still valid. And there are a number of people that have written about these sorts of shifts, some of them similar to mine, some of them different. And I think it's worth just reading some of these different pieces just to prompt different thinking. And obviously the first is, new ways of working, and that was the most obvious for us as we went through COVID and people work from home. But now, what is the role of the office? How do we ensure we maintain culture? How do we ensure we maintain collaboration? How do we generate the right sort of development and coaching for our people? And I think the role of the office is changing, not just due to restrictions in terms of how many people we can have there, but let's think about it in a different way. What's the intersection between what suits the organisation, what suits the people, what suits the culture, how best to collaborate? And it's not the way that we used to do it. This is an opportunity not just to bounce back to what we did before. Then clearly the acceleration of digital and the use of data. I think we've had a 5-year step change in this instance, 5-year step change in terms of acceleration of digital, maybe not so much data at this stage. McKinsey, McKinsey Consulting, who I do recommend as a good source of strategic thinking, I think they've really stepped up in 2020 and into 2021, have done a number of pieces of research that I think are really valuable. And one of them back in October, which was a global study of 13 different countries, where they said companies were now 3 times more likely to conduct 80% of their customer interactions online. So they were 3 times more likely to conduct 80% of their interactions online. And 2/3 of their consumers had tried new ways of shopping, with 65% of them intending to continue. So consumers and customers have shifted, and companies have shifted in how they want to serve, meeting that need, both from an operational perspective, that it's efficient and effective, but also from a consumer and a customer desire perspective. So that's really interesting to hear. And I think we need to think about what is that for our own business? What do we need to accelerate? And in conversations with a couple of my clients, this is a key focus in 2021. We proved we can make quicker decisions, and we could get new products and services out there. And I think this will continue. So that comes back to that innovation, that experimentation. It's about quick decisions, fast processes. How do we actually change the speed? Minimal viable product has been a big part of startups for years. How do we actually continue to do that? How do we change our lines of decision making to be at the right level in the organisation? A fourth, and obviously earlier we've had some real challenges with supply chains, and I believe I know a number of organisations continue to, especially where they've got inputs coming from overseas in Asia. I think the ethos for many years for many organisations was just in time. We need to think about just in case. We need to actually having some redundancy in our supply chains, and part of that, I believe, is around ecosystems, around what do we do with competitors? What do we do onshore versus offshore? How do we actually get greater visibility through digital and data to understand not just our first level supply chains, but the levels below that, which we have typically less transparency to. And it's not just about your supply chains, it's about where you are a supplier to other customers. because your customers will be thinking about the same things. And so there's two angles to think about there. Where you may be, a very large percentage of your customers, you've got a high share of wallet of your customers, how do you shore that up? That they don't start to look for redundancy and for some variability from that mindset. But also, where you have low share of wallet or no share of wallet, where's the opportunity for you to use a wedge for them to hedge with you in some parts of the services or goods? So I think there's two things. There's a retention issue around your current customers, and there's an opportunity in terms of growing share with new or growing the share of wallet that you have, as well as, of course, looking at your own supply chain. There is, I think really key, we've shown the importance of trust. Trust in institutions, trust in leadership, trust in people. And I don't need to go into instances where it's clearly failed. But interestingly, research by Edelman showed that the #1 trusted source of information around COVID has actually been people's employer, not governments and health. Now, some of those come higher. So I think that shows where that's clearly the case. And I'm sure there is a correlation between those organisations where there's high trust around this 6th one, which is around authentic leadership. What is that authentic leadership? How is that going to play out? And where there's been authentic leadership, that's been able to generate trust for people in their organisations and being able to build that. And I think that's key. And the war for talent is pretty key. And Paul Hallam, who's on this call, I noticed as a very successful executive search, and we were talking about this yesterday, that there is need out there, there's demand, and it's starting to pick up. And those people that have been successful during COVID in terms of how they led their organisations, their authentic leadership, their ability to make change and to deal with the VUCA world are going to be in high demand as we go forward. And so if you've got people in your organisation like that, how are you retaining them? But also, how are you moving to bring new people in over time? So that's review. And I think, once you do that, you're then ready to think about the reset. And so capture those issues, those trends, the challenges and opportunities for 2021 and beyond. So thinking about all those different shifts, thinking about your customers, your people, your processes. And a great way to do that is a simple SWOT. It doesn't have to be complex. A strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat. And you can do that with your team. Give them some prompts, some data, some things to think about. But what have we seen out of 2021 that are our strengths we want to take forward? What are the weaknesses we need to address? Where are the opportunities, either in market segments or products or innovation? And what threats do we have? So that really determines how you pull together the review. Pretty simple in that sense. And then what does that mean? It's like, there's the so what. So we can say, oh, we've done this piece of analysis, but so what? What does it mean for our strategy? But just as importantly, what does it mean for our operating model? And those that have worked with me know that there's sort of two frameworks that I think are really effective to do that for strategy and operating model. And the first is the Lafferty Martin Playing to Win, which comes from Procter & Gamble, which is very much a simple model that strategy is around making choices by answering 5 simple questions. What is our winning aspiration? What's our purpose? What guides us? Vision in some languages, and being really clear on that. Where we will play, where's our geographies? What's our product and service categories? What segments, what stage of the production are we in? And if we've done that review right, that will start to prompt some questions about what do we need to dial up? What do we need to dial down or dial out of? And then once you've made those decisions, and it's an iterative process, as you can see by the arrows going backwards and forwards, what's your competitive advantage, your value proposition? And those 2 questions, where we will play and how we win, are the core of strategy. They're the core of the choices you make to deliver that winning aspiration. And then once you've made those choices, what are your capabilities? What are the reinforcing activities and the specific configuration of them? And one of the things, interestingly, quite often when you go through this exercise, and if you do it in this form and you've looked at your strengths, there may be some capability strengths you've had that actually aren't enunciated or properly leveraged in your strategy. Potentially you've found that you're a much quicker to prototype and to get products into market during COVID, but that's actually speed to market is not one of the capabilities you've leveraged in your organization, and maybe that's an opportunity. Or you've found that you've got some significant leadership that stood up during that period that you actually haven't determined how you embed that in your capabilities, and in fact in the systems, the structures, the measures to support those choices. So for a couple of clients I've worked with, we've refreshed their Playing to Win, and one or two we've actually done a whole new one based on what they've learned and what they've seen over time. And a simple model, and there's some great resources online that gives you a bit more around it, but it's certainly ain't rocket science, as it shouldn't. It's really around choice. What do you do and what don't you do? And then the other one is around the business model canvas, which really is a 9-boxer that looks at all the different elements of how your model operates and what stresses do you have. What segments you're in, what's the nature of those relationships, how do you go to market through distribution, what's your value proposition, how does the activities and resources and partners supply it, and then what are the ins and outs from a cash perspective. And answering questions around this, and there's some great online resources on this as well, is a really great way to then stress test. If you've made that strategic choice, does your business model support it? And one of the conversations I had with the client last week was in the business model canvas we'd done last year, and when we did a review of the SWOT, it was clear that a threat from their competitors who have a different business model had heightened during COVID, even though their business had done well. And therefore we needed to think very differently, in fact, how we partnered with their competitors. So, and that was back to that network ecosystem business. So we're thinking about how do we change our interaction to actually partner with them in certain areas to be able to reduce that element of competition. So the Lafferty Martin strategy model, business model canvas, both really simple, and I'll have resources on that on the website for you. So to reset, you capture those issues, trends. As I said, SWOT's a great way of doing it, keeping it simple, so what statements. Then what does that mean for your strategy? 2 simple ways of doing that. Your Playing to Win or your business model canvas. If you've already got some other strategic frame, then you use those. That's really effective. And then the third is, how does that impact what your priorities and focus is as you enter 2021? And how do you think about your goals, what it is you want to achieve specifically? And this vision map is a good way of doing it. And it's 5 key areas: passion, people, products and services, market, and finance. So what do you want to achieve from a growth perspective in finance? Where are you looking for profit from? Are there changes you need to make to your profit margins? Funding. Do you need funds to support your growth strategies? Is your funding right? As we know, in small to medium businesses, cash flow is normally the killer, not competitive positioning. In the market, what place do you want to play in the industry? Is there opportunities to do things with competitors? Which customers do you want to grow? Which ones do you want to shrink? What new products and services? What stop doing? Similar Pareto principles to products and services. What 20% or 30% of your products do deliver 80% or 70% of your revenue? Where can we stop doing things? One of my clients has now a major strategic plan on reducing their product line, and they're going to reduce their product line by thousands because there is a very, very long tail. And of course, clearly, what do you need to embed, to communicate, and your competitive advantage? And then people. What do you need to do to develop leadership? Do you have the right leadership? What's the capabilities, and what does your team look like? And we'll talk about capabilities in the regrowth section in a minute. And then passion. What's your purpose? What impact are you going to have? And how is your organisation going to give back? What's your role from an environmental, social perspective? What's your community? What communities are you in? How do you leverage that to add value to all your stakeholders. Similarly, I've got some cheat sheet questions on each of these that I'll share that help you just do that. And what I suggest is just get your leadership team and start to brainstorm those. Having done that strategic review, having looked at resetting your strategy and your business model, then what do we actually want to achieve in 2021? What does the year look like for us in that perspective? So capture the issues, review your strategy and operating, and then impact your priorities. What do we want to focus on in 2021? And as I said, the vision map is a good prompt for that. You may have some other goal-setting ways of doing that. But what I do encourage you is think about, the top 5, top 6, top 7. It's got to be focused. Focus is as important as having priorities. But then how do we actually bring it to bear? How do we actually bring it into action? And I'm, as many of you know, a fan of the one-page plan. And now we're how for the next 90 days. Where are you now at the beginning of the year? What's the current situation against each of those priorities and goals? Where do you want to be at the end of the quarter? And how are you going to get there? Not where you want to be at the end of the year, but where do you want to be in the quarter? So for instance, if you have a strategy around entering a new market segment that you're not in now, that's you now. We're not in this market set. Where do you want to be? By the end of the quarter, you may want to have had a trial with 5 customers in that segment trialing a product line. How are you going to get there? Then it's the task that do that. Setting up a project team, developing a minimal viable product, identifying customers that would be attracted by that. So now we're how really simple model, but very effective to get to implementation and action. And then that just requires you to document that in a one-page plan. And that then becomes what you track your actions around your strategic priorities. So this really is all about taking strategy into action, because quite often we do the strategic exercise. We might have a 2-day offsite. I think those days are gone, but we need to actually bring it into action. And if we think about speed and velocity and living in a VUCA world and in a world where things are still uncertain on a number of variables, I encourage everyone to have 90-day resets. How do we go? What was our now for last quarter? Where do we want to be next quarter? How are we going to get there? 90-day resets that I think are really critical to enable you to have that velocity, to have that agility, and also, most importantly, to create focus for you and your teams, and not just look at strategy and strategy resetting as an annual or biannual activity, but having reset, given where we've been, looking at how do we actually keep it alive in a really agile way. So one-page plans now we're how in 90 days. So to me, it's an agile approach. I think it's a 2-hour burst every quarter, iterate and adapt. And I think that agile approach, because we don't have time to go away for long offsites for days on end. The days of that are gone. And increasingly, and during COVID, I was able to run full strategic planning processes just with 2-hour bursts, a week or 2 weeks apart, doing each of these activities. What's the SWOT? What are the issues? What does it mean for our strategy and our model? What does it look for our priorities? What are we going to do now? And you can do that really quickly, iterate and adapt. And I think that is the agile strategy planning process for the future. Works, keeps us close to market, enables us to understand what's working and what's not, and keeps everyone aligned and practical. So just be keen for people to think about, as you head into 2021, what do you need to hit reset on? So I'd be keen for people just to use the chat function, just to put in, what for you do you need to hit reset on as you go into 2021? What are you looking to hit reset on? Yeah, just have a think about, what do you need to hit reset on? What's your so Mary Jane, what our customers want that's different than pre-COVID? Yeah, things have changed. What do they want differently? I was listening to a podcast this morning, and the phrase that was put up was, fall in love with customers' problems, not your solution. Fall in love with customers' problems, not your solution. We're in love with our solution. So cleaning delegation and processing pipelines. So making sure you're able to step up in terms of being the leader rather than doing things. Joe, the way that the leadership team works together, and that comes down to capability, and operating model, things like 90-day plans, for instance, or whatever it is that gets action for you. Any other thoughts of what is it you need to hit reset on? So Margaret, consistency of service and product delivery. 2020, very inconsistent year due to massive swings in operations. For you in the tourism business. Rochelle, new world of work, hybrid model that works for our customers. And that's what we need to think about. It's not just about what works for our people, it's that intersection. Mary Jane, rebuilding and energy and passion. For Paul, the office, what role does it play moving forward, and how we get people to come back to ensure culture and collaboration? And there's certainly some reticence. I know that from a few conversations with a few people on this call, there's some reticence around that. So hitting reset is really key. And having a theme, I think, Donna, delegation and review the customer experience, really good opportunity. And to think about what can we digitally can do that enhances that. Jared, taking affirmative action, experimenting, I think that's really good. So encourage you after today to think about what it is you need to do, hit reset on, what's important for you. So we've talked about review, we've talked about reset, and then to me it's around regrow. Now, it's not just around, many of you have grown anyway, some not so much, but others do need to regrow. But I think it's around, can you continue to grow and can you implement change? Given what you've learned, where you want to focus your strategy and what your priorities are, can you implement change? And do you have the capabilities to do that? Is your leadership aligned to Joe's point, making sure they work together? Do you have the energy and motivation? And if people, it is going to continue to be a bit of a grind this year, but we need to work out how to enthuse and energize and give people purpose. And that's why this sort of rethink process helps do that. So we take pause. So as I said, McKinsey have done some good work on this. And there's an article from November where they did a survey on rethinking capabilities to emerge stronger. I'm going to share 2 bits of data from that. Maybe it's rethink rather than regrow. Not want to stretch that too far. But their research of a number of organisations around the world was capability building is now much more important than before COVID-19. So before it was 59%, so it was very extremely important, and it's now 78%. And I think people have seen their organisations under stress. They've seen their people under stress. And then they've seen the opportunities for new business models and new strategies going forward. So quite a shift in that. I quite don't understand those organisations that say that 7% see it's not at all or only slightly important. I think they may be the Kodaks of the future. 1/3 though, only 1/3 say their capability building programs often or always achieve business impact. Only 1/3. That's really concerning, I think. And so we need to think about, half think they rarely do, and some only sometimes. Sometimes, and 10% rarely. I think we really need to give a good hard look at ourselves. Do our capability programs achieve their business impact? And McKinsey's view from their research was they saw 4 imperatives for managing people and building capabilities to thrive, given what they've seen as the shifts in the market. And I think some of these will apply to some, not to all, but I think they're good prompts, as all these types of research is. And the 4 are, put in tomorrow's team today. We always put in, and I've said this before, tomorrow's technology today. We always, typically, spend capital on new technology platforms and systems ahead of the game. Or we should, but many people do. But we don't always do that in terms of tomorrow's teams. We quite often wait that the demand is there to fund RevX versus CapEx in terms of things like technology. So the question is, put in tomorrow's team today. And if you've had clear insight that some of yesterday's team isn't up for tomorrow, or some of today's team isn't up for tomorrow, then that's the opportunity, that issue of authentic leadership. The demand's going to be high, as I indicated before. there's an opportunity to think about what is tomorrow's team based on the capabilities you need, based on your focus and your priorities. What is tomorrow's team? And then identify and elevate the handful of tangible business skills that matter most. And I think we've seen different things matter most during COVID, interestingly. And they had 5. So the first was for people being able to manage in a transformational way. If we're creating change and being able to navigate change, being able to actually create change in terms of how they do their job, how they lead people, how they go to market, and the speed and the agility and the creativity and innovation from that vaccine. Then be able to navigate and lead in a network of teams, being able to bring people together. If we think about collaboration being different, we think about not just teams within your organisation, but teams externally, your business partners, your suppliers, even your competitors. Business fundamentals. This is an interesting one. I think we've found at times that some people lack business fundamentals, even if things like understanding the finances. One kind of talked to one of their people, one of their senior people has gone back and done some refresher on business fundamentals, financial fundamentals, because he thought he didn't have that. And I think that's, what are the business fundamentals? And quite often ego gets in the way of us thinking about what do we need to either get ourselves up to speed on or just refresh. New business models, as I talked about before. What is an alternative business model that leverages the need, but also uses opportunities around digital and data and supply chains, which I talked about before. Both the supply chains that you're part of and the supply chains that support you as an organisation. Now, these will be different for each organisation, but I think your review and your reset process will set the context about what are the key business skills that matter most, your key capabilities. Treat technological acumen as you treat profit targets. And to me, that means technology should no longer be the sole remit of IT, if it ever was. Just as in people management, HR is not the responsibility of HR, it's the responsibility of each person to lead their team, and HR is there to support them in that and provide capability and skills. IT is there to support people. Marketers, for instance, will only be successful if there is leading in digital and technology as they are in marketing strategy and brand strategy. If they're not, if they're leaving it to their IT department to how to implement their CRM or how to scope and determine their website, how to change the customer experience, then they're actually not going to get it right. So technological acumen needs to be as important as profit, marketing, HR, etc. It's key. It's not the domain of the IT. And liberate teams to solve problems rapidly from a customer-backed problem perspective. Be able, in my view, I look at this one a little bit to McKinsey did, but enable decision-making to be at the right level in your organisation and where possible as close to the customer as possible, to enable people to solve customer problems and to get them solved at that time, at that point of issue. But also then to think about that in terms of how you develop products and services going forward. That's really key for people to think about in terms of where they go. So as you think about capabilities to succeed in 2021 and beyond, I'd be keen for you to open it up for a quick chat amongst people around what do they see as the key capabilities for you. What do you see your key capabilities you need to focus on in your organisation moving forward into 2021? So keen to open up the mics and keen for people just to think about what it is they would see as their key capabilities. So think about what it is you need to succeed in 2021. What do you want to hit the reset on, and what capability do you need to succeed? So to me, a pretty simple model. Review the 2020 journey, what worked, what didn't, and what do you need to focus on? What do you need to reset in terms of your strategy and your business model? and what you need to regrow. And I think capability, growing capability is probably the most critical. What you do need to do in markets is probably more obvious. What you need to do to support your reset is more critical around that capability piece. So thank you. Thanks for joining us. As I said, I'll place all the information on the website, and I'll send you a link to that. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out.